What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we're going back to the 80s, and we're going to be taking on a franchise in this new retrospective, a franchise I've wanted to cover for quite a long time, but been a little worried about doing so. We're going to be covering Police Academy, but I'm not doing this on my own. I'm joined by my own little set of misfits, Dave, Horrocks, and Maff. How are you doing, guys? You okay?
Doing very well, sir. As soon as you put the call out, I used to love this series, and so I was like, okay, I'm sort of scared of going back a little bit. Watched the first one again fairly recently, like within the last year, and I was like, ooh. But I do remember absolutely loving this franchise, and more so the first four, which is what we're going to cover today. So it only seemed right to throw my hat in the ring.
Yeah, I'm glad you joined us. As we were saying, this is going to be the Gutenberg years, or the Gutenberg saga, if you want to refer to it as that. And also, I'm joined by Maff. Maff, how are you doing? You okay?
Not too bad. Same again. I saw that you were going to do this, and I thought, yeah, I love Police Academy. They were really good. I remember watching them in the 80s and thinking there was a couple of reasons why I watched them in the 80s. But I thought, yeah, they can't be that bad, surely. And then I watched them. But, it was interesting to go back and watch them again. And as I say, we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yes, we will. Yeah. Well, they'll definitely have a piece. And I'll say we're going to be covering the first four, which is obviously Police Academy 2, First Assignment, Police Academy 3, Back in Training, and Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol. And it's quite, I'm doing that off the top of my head. That's sort of like, that's how much sort of like, dedicated we are to this retrospective. But we will start with 1984's Police Academy, starring, and I'm just going to quickly pull it up so I can remember, because there's names, the people that come up and return is interesting, actually. But obviously starring like Steve Guttenberg, GDW, which is Lieutenant Harris, Kim Cattrall, an early appearance, Bubba Smith, Donovan Scott, George Gaines as Commander Lassard, David Graff as Tackleberry, Leslie Eastbrook as Callahan, Michael Winslow as Larvell Jones. They're sort of the main ones. But there's other characters as well that will turn up, and we're going to talk about some of the characters that turn up. There'll be specific ones I'll call out as we go. But let's start with the first one then. So 1984's Police Academy. Before we get into details, let's start with you, Dave. What were your first thoughts then on Police Academy, the first film?
Again, I actually think I watched the second one more than the first. And what surprised me is going through all four. Yeah, I've watched all four lots and lots of times.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't, before I embarked on this, I couldn't tell you which little bits happened in which movie.
Mm-hmm.
It all just blended into one thing.
They are quite interchangeable in that way.
Yeah, they all came out like 1 year after the other, didn't they? Which is unbelievable if you think about like how long it normally takes to put together a script. So yeah, I thought, look, it's still funny to me, and some of it is uncomfortably funny because you think, you couldn't get away with that today. Stuff like the Blue Oyster Bar, the kind of stuff like that. But look, I can't help it. There's still that child in me that was back in the mid-80s that kind of found that sort of stuff funny. Yes, you couldn't do it now, but I still really enjoyed going back through it. I think I enjoyed Mahoney's character less, though, in this first one, which I wasn't really expecting. We're in 2022. The police in the US have a rather horrible, you've got all this shit that's going on with them right now, and it's kind of opened the lid, and it sparks my brain. I kind of just want to go along with the movie, but my brain is kind of going to what it's really like, and some of the things that they do, and Mahoney's just a bit of a dick, isn't he? Causing all this criminal damage himself, like before he gets looped in. So yeah, I couldn't really separate the reality from just watching the movie. But yeah, I just as it unfolded, I just remembered almost everything, and I can hear it now when they go into the Blue Oyster Bar. There,
Yeah.
it's just I just can't help it. Like I say, I know it's wrong, but I just found it funny.
We'll get to that actually, because you say about it being 2022, and one of the things obviously that you talk about, obviously the police in America and the reputation they have at the moment. There's obviously been an awful lot of stuff like police brutality and that sort of thing. Mahoney's not the character that troubles me. Like you say, he's a bit of a dickhead, but he's sort of like that lovable loser, isn't he? He's the sort of like the goofball, or the sort of like the snarky cool kid. That's what they're trying to. He's almost like a Ferris Bueller kind of trying to be a character. The one that terrifies me is Tackleberry.
Yeah.
In all honesty, Tackleberry is the character that I keep coming back to, and I'm like, you could not do Tackleberry in 2022 because he's the person that would result. He's the one that would instigate a riot. You know what I mean? He's the most problematic character almost of the entire franchise.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. What about you, Matt? What were your thoughts on the first, your first thoughts on Police Academy 1?
Oh, I went and picked up the DVD and I thought, all right, okay. I can't remember. I remember Police Academy. I would not be able to pick out the plot. There's much of a plot between all four of them. They all just you could probably make one film out of all four of them of the best bits. It wouldn't be very long. But I must admit, it is a bit of a guilty pleasure where you go back and you're watching, you are laughing at stuff that you think you could not laugh at things like that these days, really. Yeah, the Blue Oyster Bar. As soon as that came on, I just thought, oh gosh, and it's funny when there's certain sounds that you can hear and certain music you hear, and it brings back a memory. Star Wars, you get TIE fighters and that you hear that noise from the Blue Oyster Bar and you think, oh my gosh. And it's amusing that it's been in all four that I've seen so far on this rewatch. And the fact that they do just keep going back to that pit because they know more back then they knew it was funny. Mahoney is a dick. He's meant to be a dick though. That's the thing. He's meant to be that lovable rogue that although he's out of order. He's the guy that you root for. Yes, I can see where Tackleberry would be a massive problem these days. But it's Harris. Now, Harris is meant to be the bad guy. But the way he treats people and that, again, even being a villain these days, I still think you would struggle with him doing a lot of the stuff that he does. That there are quite a few racial slurs in there, and homophobic ones as well. And I think they're the bits where, especially with what's happened in the last few years with the police, that's the bit that does take you out and you think, though this is funny, this is good, you've gone too far now. And it's very problematic.
Yeah, that's an interesting point though, because I think you are right. Well, let's get to the nub of it. Is the racial slurs in particular, and this is what I want to. There's a point I want to argue, and I'm going to put something maybe more controversial. Let's see, because it is always the villains in this. There's three main villains, aren't there? There is, as you say, there's Lieutenant Harris, played by G.W. Bailey, and then there's the two sort of like dickhead cadets, Copeland and Blanks, played by Scott Thompson and Brant von Hoffman. And they're sort of like the thing is, the model of this film goes back to, like Attack of the Nerds, Animal House, Stripes. Like, it's not, this film is
Porky's.
Porky's,
Yeah,
exactly.
Porky's.
This film is not unique in any particular way. It's a sort of a type of, it's almost a sex comedy without being a sex comedy. Like, they've taken that sort of, like, the lovable losers make good, and put it into a police film. That's the idea. They are the lovable losers. However, what I find is, because they are the sort of the misfits, the ragtag bunch, almost like the raggy dolls of whatever. Because it's D Patrol, isn't it, or whatever, like Callahan's and Harris's patrol. I'd forgotten all that. Like, there's a specific patrol. It's not just the whole academy year. It's this one patrol or one troop or whatever. They're all the misfits. But all the good guys are relatively, like, race positive. Like, they sort of, like, Hooks and Hightower are sort of a part of the group. There's no sort of, like, discrimination there within the misfits. It always comes from outside. It always comes from Harris, but it also comes from Copeland and Blanks. But Copeland in particular, like, they instantly highlight how, that he's awful by being a racist, because the first thing he says, he sort of, and I had to double check to see what this was, but he says there's an awful lot of spades around here, and then he sees Hightower and he's like, and that's a good thing. When they steal his car later on, it's got the Confederate flag as as his license plate, sort of thing, and there's a few other things like that like they are set up to just be. It's what's interesting, even in 2022, in the time now of 2022, where we're at now, the fact that the Confederate flag in 1984 was instantly recognized as being as being a sign of you being a dick and this other stuff is bizarre. The fact it's taken them like 35 years and it's still not been resolved. So weirdly, I feel that this film is strangely, like, race positive. Sort of like there's no, because. I don't know, because do you know what I'm saying? Like, because both Hooks and Hightower are very professional. Because Hook's getting on, like, she can't climb over the wall, and then obviously by the end of the film, when she can climb over that wall, like, you see Callahan being proud of her and stuff, and she's got, like, a positive relationship with Kim Cattrall's character and stuff. I don't know. There's still, like, there's problems, but there's still this bit where I'm like, I don't know. I was just sort of what I was thinking.
It's an issue because you mentioned there it's Hightower and Hooks mainly are the ones that get kind of picked on.
Yeah.
Whereas Jones is more of an arse with obviously what he does with all the noises it makes and things like that. But he doesn't seem to get highlighted as much. But I can see you have a fair point, because that racism is brought up, but then it's like the spade line. It then moves across to Hightower, and you see the look on his face of, you don't want to do this, and that, oh yes, he realizes at that point that he's really messed up here. So I suppose it's an interesting way of looking at it. I think that, although it's highlighted at the same point, they are trying to combat it in a way.
Exactly. I think it's the weird thing that it's sort of like, it seems, no, I'll flip this in a minute, but I feel the film is trying to be race positive. However, the film is Mahoney. Confession time. Obviously, I'm a massive Ghostbusters fan, and me and Chris Phelps have an ongoing battle about as to whether or not Peter Venkman is a sex pest. I will defend Peter Venkman, and Chris wants to bring him down. But I will say Mahoney is most definitely a sex pest. Not just because he obviously, he's trying to get thrown out, but him trying to sort of see Kim Cattrall's thighs and all that sort of thing. But the scene where he is watching the women in the shower and doesn't get spotted, but then Lieutenant Harris does, and they all start screaming, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's funny because Harris has been spotted. I'm like, yeah, but Mahoney, how long was Mahoney there for? Just perving on these women in the shower.
He's stood there drinking a beer, isn't he? So he's obviously been there for a good amount of time. And...
Exactly. And I'm like, hang on, is that supposed to be all right because he's the cool one? I don't understand this.
I think it was. That was the moment that made me think of Porky's, to be honest. Especially with the shower thing. But yeah, I actually found myself empathizing a little bit more with Harris, because he's supposed to be that drill sergeant, essentially. He's got to whip these people into shape, and they're fucking terrible in all their different ways. But I just going back to your race positive point, I think you can argue that, because everyone who uses these slurs is a dick. And that's what the film's telling us. So we shouldn't focus on the fact that these slurs are made. The people who do them are dicks. So we should point at them and laugh and say, you're dicks. The homophobia, I don't think there's so much of an argument there.
No.
So that was more that kind of made me a bit uncomfortable. And you mentioned about Kim Cattrall as well. I mean, there is no point in her. There is no character development at all with her. She literally is there just to be ogled at, isn't she? And, she does show off her thighs at the end. And look, Pete Kim Cattrall, I do have a soft spot for that. But, yeah, I just felt like there were so many problematic things. But again, it's like, I know it's problematic, but the nostalgia is just like, yeah, go on, laugh though. It's like nudging me. Go on, it's funny though, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's like that. It's like that sort of like, it's like that sort of like grandparent or uncle or something, isn't it? That you shouldn't laugh at, but like there's still a charm to it. Like it's innocent, it's naive in its sort of like, there are still lines, but and I'm trying not to defend. I'm definitely not defending some of his positions, but it's never meant in malice. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the whole thing. Even like so, there's a lot when they go, they steal Copeland's car, and they tear the line. When they tear the seats out and stuff, and that's kind of funny. I do like that when like he's like he makes the joke and Hightower just rips the seats out and stuff.
Yeah.
But before they do that, like Hightower wakes up Mahoney, and he's like, it's 3 in the morning. Like, what do you want me to do? Talk about not being able to drive. He goes, well, sleeping's for fags. And again, you're like, just the sort of casual way it's that sort of phrase is sort of thrown out there. I'm just like, and you can say that it's the 80s, it's the way that it was sort of thing. But you're like, this is where it's problematic. You're like, I'm supposed to be rooting for these guys, but it's clearly it's clearly not good. But yeah,
I think that's the thing. We can look back knowing that we saw that 30 odd years ago, and we know what that area that era was like in a lot of films. I mean, there's a lot of films which Dave and Chris do on VHS where they don't age well, and they wouldn't be able to be made like that in this day and age. But to a certain degree, we kind of give it a bit of a pass because that's what it was back then. There is the nostalgia there that kind of pushes us forward to think, well, we know it's wrong, and we know really we shouldn't laugh at it, but there's still that, back then, I think when this came out, I was about 8 years old. But then it had certain points in there that brought my attention to, and it wasn't just Callahan's points, that brought me kind of to enjoy it. And I can kind of go back there, even knowing that there's certain things you shouldn't be doing now.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think, it's fine to accept. I think this is the place we're in, like, at the moment, where it's just, the funny thing is that we are talking about a 1984 film. It's 35 plus years old. And we're now but we are almost, worried about making a comment about a film because you're saying, because it's got, potentially racial or homophobic jokes in it. But like you say, it's the thing you've got to go, yeah, it wasn't good, but it was never, it's not like it's meant in malice. Even the Blue Oyster Club that's meant, what I would say, you could turn a lot of this stuff. The Blue Oyster Club is not good. Like, it's problematic. Like, it's endlessly problematic. However, even when like Copeland and stuff get, because it comes up again and again, whether it's going to be Proctor or Harris or Mauser later on, we'll talk about it. But at least, no one in that bar, they obviously play up the big sort of white, the YMCA, what they're called. What was the band called?
YMCA.
Yeah, the village people.
Yeah,
Village
the
people.
village people. So
Village
yeah,
people. It clearly plays up
I was
that
thinking
village
Frankie
people.
Goes to Hollywood.
Yeah. It's playing up that
Close.
village people sort of stereotype of stuff, like, you know, all the leathers there and all that kind of stuff, like, you know, the caps and things. But at no point is anyone actually judging them. Like, you know, they go in there and they're being sort of like, it's the fact that, like, you know, again, the joke is almost the terrifiedness of the sort of like of Copeland or Proctor or you know, whoever ends up in the club. The men in the gay club are never actually judged. They're just sort of there and they take charge. And it's the funny thing is, even at the end of it, when it goes back and there's a slow dance going on and stuff like that. It's you know, it's actually kind of funny because it's not saying like, but it's bad because it's like, oh, look at these weirdos kind of thing. But it's still not like no one's actually saying they're wrong or they're bad. Like, you know, it's a weird one. I don't. It's an odd sort of mix of like, this is problematic, but it's not being malicious.
It's the film kind of has taken all the stereotypes of, you know, and they've elevated it more.
Yeah.
And more so back in the 80s, it was a lot easier to get away with. If you can take your mind back to there, you can kind of understand where they're going. I mean, you know, I remember talking to one of my gay friends and that, and we were having a laugh and a joke with him and just saying that, you know, we were a bit nervous sometimes when he kind of came out and he's like, you know, is he going to fancy us and this and that? And he says, why do you think I would even fancy you? You're an ugly bastard. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And I think that's where back then, you know, people used to be scared because they're like, oh, he's gay. Oh, no, you know, I'm not safe. Well, don't say that you God's gay.
Don't flatter yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and the thing is, we're now a lot further on where it's a lot more accepting. You know,
Yeah.
It's still got a long way to go, and that, you know, but we are getting to that point. And when we do look back at these films, you can look and think that is wrong, but you can again look at it and think, how far have we come from that where we can accept these things?
Yeah, and I think that you're right, actually, and that's a really good point, is that sort of, you know, we can look back and go, actually, this is problematic, and you know, it shouldn't, you know, you wouldn't see that today. Just to your point about sort of, you know, friends coming out and stuff, I always think that there's no one more offended than, you know, a sort of like a slightly bigoted straight man who finds out that gay people don't find him attractive. Like, they're the one. What do you mean? What do you mean?
Why
you
not?
know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, do you? I'm confused. Do you want them to find you attractive or not? Like, but yeah. So the first one has got, like I say, is problematic, and but the key thing to this film, we've all said that there's a charm to it, and there's most definitely a nostalgic charm to it, and I do think although we've said, it's clear that Mahoney's a bit of a dick. However, Steve Guttenberg still does pull off that. He's still got a charm. He's still got that sort. It's no wonder that he was so sort of like, you know, we forget that, you know, we forget how sort of ubiquitous he was in the 80s. You know, like, I could, you know, like, I'm just going to know his whole thing, but there's films that I watched regularly as a kid, Short Circuit, you know, 3 Men and a Baby. Like, he was all over the place in the 80s. Like, he was one of those sort of actors. And he had that, because he had that charm, he had that sort of roguish, you know, twinkle in his eye. But I think that carries him a long way. But the other thing is, like, this whole crew, most of them do have something to offer. And I think, although, because the film is a bunch of sketches, isn't it? Let's be clear. Like, the film is a collection of sketches that lead up to an end point that comes out of nowhere. Like, I love the fact that, like, you know, the makes good scene at the end, the finale, literally comes out of nowhere. But they all sort of get a chance to shine. Like, you know, they all get a scene pretty much where you get to see them improve, or they get to do something. And so I really like that. And especially, but they know, it's clear they know who their sort of stars are. Like, you know, like you said, Jones gets to use his voice mimicry repeatedly and in some great ways. So by the end of the film, although the sort of, like you say, it's been a little hit and miss and it's been problematic, like, I'm enjoying all the cast for the most part, I think. What do you think, Dave? What do you think about that?
I think it's a fair point. I mean, it is an ensemble cast, but I think from out of this first movie, it's clear who the star is, and you can't even say, well, is that because he had favorable screen time or anything? I don't necessarily think it is. I think, there were plenty of the other characters who had the screen time. It was just that cheeky little smile that he's got and the expressions that he makes. I think, that was the start of him going on to bigger and better things, even when he's coming out of the little lectern there and Lassard thinks he's giving him a bit happy time. So yeah, I think it was good. And I think as well, it going back, it did teach me that, the other guys did get quite a lot of screen time. And one of the non-reoccurring characters that I kind of miss from the following movies is George Martin.
Yes.
Oh, George Martin.
Yeah. George Martin.
And it's funny how there's so many, out of these first four, there are so many little bits that are still referenced like today, in life. And George Martin, putting on his accent to get the girls is one of those things where you just think, that's kind of what I thought as a kid,
Yeah.
If you just had a cool accent, then the girls would come flocking, and it's just.
But he is kind of cool. I do like him though. George Martin is, and the fact that he's a great cat. It reminds me of he's the same as Danny John Jules, the cat. He's just sort of he has just an aura. But I like it when because you have Callahan, and when Callahan sort of takes control of him basically, and he sort of then he has a conversation with Mahoney after. He's like, have you ever been sort of had a woman just hold you down and screw your brains out? And he's like, no. And he's like, I did last night. He's like, what, one woman? And he's like, yeah. And it's just it is funny, and they know how to sort of play some of these characters up. But he is a character. I agree. Actually, I miss him from later films. Because they bring back some odd ones, like Fackler comes back, and I'm just like he and his wife. I get he's obviously the slapstick one, but I'm just like he's not that funny. He just doesn't work. But yeah, George Martin would have been great to come back.
Because I remember Fackler, he was one of the ones I thought, oh yeah, he's the accident prone, but he's not in it a lot.
No.
And he does do a couple of accident prone things, which kind of works out in his favour. But I remember him being in more kind of once he kind of came on screen. Oh, I remember this guy. Yeah, this, and as I say, he's not really used that much, but then he keeps popping up every now and again.
He becomes like a regular. He's in the first. He's in the first two. I think he might be in the first three actually, because his wife joins. Yeah. I'm just looking at IMDb. I just want to go back to Steve Guttenberg. You are 100% right. This came out in 1984, the first one. We'll get into this in a second. But before this, he's done some TV movies. He's done some bits and pieces. But this is what made him. This, because you get Police Academy 1, 2, then you get Cocoon, and then you get sort of 3 for Short Circuit, Police Academy 4, and then after Police Academy 4, you've got 3 Men and a Baby, High Spirits, Cocoon, 3 Men and a Little Lady. It's sort of this is what made him really. So it was Police Academy, it was the what allowed him to be that breakout star. So you're definitely right that was his breakout really thing. It's what defined him. Because others don't stick around. But
what do you think in this day and age, if you were to kind of put him against another character, another actor, who would you think he would be? Whilst I was watching it just popped into my mind that if this was to be remade, obviously.
I want to ask that question. I really do.
Right. Because
Chris Pratt.
Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh,
because
okay.
It's that quick-witted kind of one-liners that he does. And
so I think Ryan Reynolds is funnier. But I agree. Because what you are right. Because one of the films I thought about whilst I was watching this was Van Wilder.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's kind of got that American Pie, Van Wilder kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. But you're right. I think we'll hold on to that thought because we'll come back to that about when we've done the sort of the Guttenberg saga. we'll come back to whether or not you think these could be remade, and we'll before we go on to the last three as the the lesser ones, especially 7, which we'll have a lot to say about, I'm sure. But yeah, because this goes on, I mean, it's a success. I just want to talk about the finale of this film very quickly. So the end of this film, we have like this riot, and then it all blows up, and this riot comes out of nowhere. One of the things I love about films in this era, because I think it's supposed to be set in New York, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they're meant to be like New York street cops, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I love early 80s, like late 70s, early 80s New York. Like when New York was clearly like almost like a hellscape. Like it was a massive city, but it was proper dingy and proper like,
Death Wish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Death Wish, kind of, The Exterminator, like those 70s vigilante films. I love all that stuff. And so I love the end of this film where like it is that sort of like the hooligans just sort of like take over. And because I do want to point out they call him all he's called in the credits is, and I'm going to find him. Doug Lennox plays main bad guy, and it's the guy who takes the guns, and he sort of takes Harris hostage and stuff at the end. So I want to just keep that in mind. I want to keep him in mind. But this whole thing of the sort of the riot and stuff and them doing good. What are your thoughts on this? The end scene, because it's almost played like it's trying to play a bit like an action scene, but not. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? Is it enough? Is it too little? Maff, what are your thoughts on that?
It is very. It kind of reminded me of like the Warriors film, where they kind of and then these gangs of hooligans. It's like all of a sudden, they're rioting. Let's just join in. And it just builds and builds from there. Again, I think in its time, it gives you that nostalgia of what they're trying to do. I'm trying to think how Mahoney finishes at the end. That I'm thinking of the one where they're in the pit.
They all blend into
exactly,
one, really, don't they?
That's
they all kind of ended.
That's the second one, isn't it? That's First Assignment.
Yeah, because Zed's not a police officer at that point.
No.
Yeah, because that's where I had trouble with them. They all kind of
they all do the same thing.
Way,
yeah,
and then it's just like credits roll, and that's it. And it's trying to, again, limited on plot, really, isn't it?
Well, that's funny because what I'll say is actually on that, because you're right, it is. They're so devoid of plot for the most part. They are given. I mean, the first one in particular is just bunch of misfits have to get through academy, make mistakes, and at the end, Hightower and Mahoney are the two that have been kicked out are able to make good and get back in. Like that's it. That's literally the plot. At least I'd say with 2, 3, and 4. Well, no, let's say 2 and 3, because 4 is very much like this, where, it's that 4 is again like weird citizens join the police academy, get thrown out, and then do good at the end. That's literally it again.
Yeah.
But with 2 and 3, at least they try and produce a plot. There's a build up of something, especially in 2. 2 in particular has a sort of like Zed and his gang are sort of there throughout the entire film, and so when it sort of comes to the end, it's sort of like it all makes sense. But that's really the only one where it, like you say, that it actually has a build up to anything. The rest, it's sort of just the finale just sort of happens, which is so bizarre. So I completely understand why you get them all mixed up.
I think you said though, it is just a sketch show, isn't it? So
oh God,
I mean,
100%, yeah.
I love the little bits like the two douchebag rookie cops, when they come in and just say shave it all off, and then George Martin comes in, he's like take a little bit off the sides.
Yeah.
It's just, I love it. But the riot at the end, for me, this first movie, it really spells out what the DNA of the franchise is going to be. You're going to have all these sketches, you're going to have certain little moments that are funny and live long in the memory, and then a lot of blank space in between, and then another like really funny bit and something that'll live long in the memory. And then at the end, there'll be some kind of big set piece where they get to be cops and they get to redeem themselves in some way. So I'd kind of forgotten like Mahoney got chucked out and everything, and then had to come back. I mean, utterly, unrealistic, isn't it? But we can go with that. We can forgive that.
Yeah, I mean, it's lighthearted. It's not supposed to be like it's not a. This isn't like a Scorsese film. Like this isn't heavily plot driven. That's the point. But yeah, it is a sketch film. 100%. It's a sketch. It's a collection of sketches.
I mean, it knows what it wants to be. It knows its audience. It's probably teenage boys more than anything else, really, and that it knows where it wants to aim, and it knows that it doesn't really need a plot as such. It just needs to get from one point to other, and then a big finale of look, these guys are actually quite good. Because with Mahoney and Hightower, did Hightower get kicked out in this one?
Yeah, he gets kicked. Yeah. He gets kicked because he turns the car over because, and the thing is, he turns over because of what?
Because of Hooks, isn't it?
Yeah, Copeland shouts something at Hooks, which I'm not going to say on this podcast, and then he lifts and turns the car over, and goes back to becoming a florist, and then obviously he steps in and helps them at the end of in the riot. But yeah, I mean, all right, let's just quickly sort of round out on we've talked about that, so let's just round out on Police Academy 1 because before you say.
Can I just raise one nitpick? Right, and it
just the
bugged
one.
me,
Amazing,
and I'd forgotten. Yeah, there are lots to pick, but just at the end. So obviously, halfway through the movie, you get the prostitute in the lectern, and she's giving Lieutenant Lassard a bit of happy time there. And then Mahoney sticks his head out, and Lassard turns around, and he thinks it was Mahoney, and then he goes off. And then Mahoney, graduates, and he gets up to do his speech at the end, and then you hear the zzz, So, and then he looks at Lassard, and he's like, knowing kind of, I'm getting you back. But Lassard didn't know that. Lassard thought it was Mahoney. And so,
you see, Dave, you're giving it far too much credit.
Well, part of me was thinking maybe because Lassard is actually a great detective, maybe he figured it out. But then I'm like, nope, I am definitely overthinking this. But it's one of those. I just, for whatever reason, that bit I just can't let go of. It's
I agree with what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying because it's something that always pops into my head, and I have to sort of have. In my head canon, because I would say he's explained it, because he hasn't, because up until the end, because you could even say, he knows, like they've had to explain everything, and Mahoney's explained it to him or something. But he doesn't, because he thinks Mahoney's kissing a guy when he's kissing Kim Cattrall. So this is one of the things I wanted to get to actually when we go through these films. These films have a weird relationship with continuity. Okay, because they have, in some areas, they maintain and stick with a really detailed continuity, and in others, it's just completely gone. Like it doesn't even make any sense. And I'm going to give a couple of examples actually in a minute, because the reason I wanted to pull out the bad guy in this, the main bad guy, a guy called Doug Lennox is the name of the actor. He comes back. He's actually a returning character. He comes back in 3. So there's a moment in 3 when they are doing the training, and when they go to Copeland sort of takes the new recruits and they go to the police station and they're doing a lineup. And there's a priest and a normal guy and other stuff. And they point out the guy. Right. The guy that they point out is the main baddie from the end of Police. He's even wearing the same T-shirt and everything. And
light comes on, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he sees him. He's like, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And the guy's like, oh my God. And he points at the priest.
Yeah.
Which actually I do find that kind of funny. But he comes back again in that film because he's also the main baddie at the end of the film, when they're robbing everyone and everything. And he says, like, he says, what would, and someone says to him, like, what would your mother think? And she's like, oh, I don't know, ask her, she's over there. And the old woman takes a mask off, and she's like, hello. That's the same actor. So they have this like weird, they have a reoccurring villain come back, which I thought was bizarre. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is that this, I referred to it originally. I was like, I remember each film has a different sexy woman, right? So in my head, I was like, oh, I was going to refer to him as the Gutenberg girl, because in my head, I was like, oh, every film has a Gutenberg girl. Like there's someone he gets involved with, like the love interest. And we sort of peak out in 4 with Sharon Stone. So Sharon Stone comes in as the journalist in 4.
Oh, yeah.
And then in 3 we have I'm just looking for her. Cadet Adams. So you got like Sean. Oh my God, her name's Sean Weatherly. What a fantastic name she has. But you have Cadet Adams, who's the love interest, right? In 2, this is what I remember there being an attractive, like motorcycle cop, and I was like, oh, she must be the Gutenberg girl of 2. No, she marries Tackleberry.
Yeah.
But then she doesn't really. She comes back briefly. It's Officer Kirkland. Colleen Kirkland is the name of the character. She pops up less regularly, but her family start to reoccur. That like both her so Tackleberry's brother-in-law joins in 3, and then Tackleberry's father-in-law joins the Citizens on Patrol in 4. So like, it's this weird sort of relationship that this film has with continuity, where like all these characters keep coming back, yet I don't understand the relationship between sort of Proctor and Harris and Mauser and how those people keep coming back and forth. So yeah, I don't know. It's just this weird relationship as with continuity for the good guys, or even for sort of like weird minor characters. Yet I'm curious about the career of Harris, how he becomes a captain at a precinct, and I really want to know what Proctor's career looks like, because he gets bounced around places like mad. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out, that I love the fact that there's weird continuity Easter eggs in these films.
Yeah, so what I kind of feel like, especially with each movie coming out 1 year after the next, I kind of feel like it's a case of, right, we've got the roster, we've got all the people who are in the movie, right, who's available, whose schedule fits, we're going to shoot between these dates, who can actually be there, right, we've got this list of people. This like Harris, whatever his name is, can't play. Right, we need someone else. We need a substitute for Harris. Basically, write all the same lines, but it's someone else. Mauser, yeah, that'll do. So I feel like the continuity comes from just having those same actors, and it's like, right, we'll write around that. It's like the Fast Show, isn't it? You go from series 1 to series 2. It's the same sketches, but the continuity is not. There's not a solid continuity line there.
No,
like I say, I think it's based on availability.
Oh, I 100% agree with you on that one. Like there must have been because getting these out year after year for the first 6, like the first 6 are all in a year. Like
relentless, isn't it?
Yeah.
Has any other franchise done that? Like
the only other one that I
found
was the only one I was found that was close, that had a consecutive year on year for a short time, was the Friday the 13th franchise. That's the only one that got close. And even that trailed off and sort of became a couple of years between them towards the end of the 80s. So yeah, no, I don't think so. Like this, they battened down the hatches and were like, we're all in on this police academy train and we're off. So yeah, no, it's quite impressive that they actually managed to get these out. But like I say, I think because they are sketch shows, it makes it easier, doesn't it? Because you just go, this bit's funny, and super glue, right? Super glue sketch 1, 2, and 3. Which one do we choose for this film? Right, put it in. Sort of.
I think they do a great job, because the people who don't come back, like George Martin and was it Lindsay, the big fellow? They replace them with people like I forgot from the second one. like Sweet Chucks
Mm.
is hardly in it. You know, he's basically a civilian, and it's in the third one that he and Zed actually sign up. And so again, honestly, these first four just do. Once I've got 6 months down the line, they'll all become one amorphous blob of a movie again. But yeah, I think they plonk them in these new characters really well, and can't remember what the guy's name is, but the disgusting guy with terrible personal hygiene. Again,
Oh,
the
I
bit
forgot.
I was
Yeah.
chatting to Chris about this beforehand, but the bit that I always remember is, you know, when he goes into his horrible flea pit of an apartment, and then he's got his cornflakes or whatever, or
Yeah.
Rice Krispies, and it's like, oh, come on, the litterbacks.
And then he continues
Oh.
to eat it. Yeah.
And he just stops eating it again. It's like, oh, you know, I didn't like that as a kid, but as an adult, somehow it's worse. But
Yeah.
it just lives long in the memory for you.
But he's a memorable character. He only appears in the one film.
Yeah.
But yeah, his name's Vinny Stoltman is the character. Vinny Stoltman,
That's
Officer
it.
Stoltman.
Yeah.
And he's got the big dog, hasn't he?
But
Yeah.
the dog comes back again, doesn't it? In the is it? No, it's a different dog. Hightower is a different dog further down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because actually, we'll talk about Hightower in a minute, actually, Bubba Smith, because of some of the characters you say that return, you know, because like Bobcat Goldthwait and the guy who plays Chuck, Tim Kazazin, I can't pronounce it, bloody hell, it's one of those Polish names, Kazazinski, they're actually really good friends in real life. And sort of they've done things like the comedy circuit and all this stuff together. So, and I do think they have like a weird
Right.
chemistry. Like they clearly sort of have quite good fun playing off each other, doing different bits and pieces, and become like frenemies throughout this sort of like series, don't they? Like, because by the fourth one, they're sort of like they're almost like partners, but like they clearly hate each other.
Yeah.
It's a love-hate relationship that they have.
Yeah. But I kind of find it hilarious. Like, they're some of my favorite characters, especially like Bobcat Goldthwait as Zed is a
Yeah.
he's a standout. Like after 2, and being the villain of 2, like the main villain of 2, like he should be clearly in prison, and they have to like in 3. There's like a throwaway line of like, oh, he's paid his dues. He's now coming to redeem himself. Like they were like, oh, he's brilliant. Like we want Zed back. Like
Yeah.
But yeah, like he's got this thing. There's some of the, like you say, the characters are sort of like are the fun of this, isn't it? That's the thing. It's the real fun of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry, go ahead, man.
It's like, I mean, we get Mauser in the second one, Lieutenant Mauser, and I think I preferred him than Harris.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
It did just feel like, oh, Harris isn't available.
Yeah,
We'll just slip this guy instead. It's basically the same role. It's everything's kind of the same. It's just the guy who plays Harris obviously mustn't have been available, so they just slipped this other guy in. And I think Mauser, to be fair, was more of a guy that you kind of like to hate.
Yeah.
And I think I preferred him as kind of the bad guy. I mean, especially some of the stuff they do to him. I mean, the super glue in the shower scene is brilliant.
Brilliant.
I was a bit worried at one point we were going to see a little bit more of him than what I remembered. There's a few camera shots which you think he clearly didn't have anything on.
Oh yeah, no, I was quite impressed. You know, this is those weird things where they just sort of yeah, like you say, he's clearly like, you know, butt-ass naked, and you're like, wow, that's pretty brave to be doing that. Like, I'd be down the gym, like, you know, right, okay, I've got to get ripped for this. He is more of a villain than Harris, and because you're right, because weirdly, it would make more sense for Harris to have become the commandant of the sort of the other academy for 3 than Mauser. But I do think Mauser works better because he's more of a creep, isn't he? Sort of like Harris is a sleaze and isn't a great guy. But like, I don't know, there's something more creepy about Mauser. Like I just, you know, you get the feeling he's more likely to stab you in the back than Harris.
Yeah,
well,
I think
Harris. Sorry,
I was just going to say, I think Harris, he reminds me of the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket. You know, that is, you know, he's a police version of that for me. So he is trying to make the department the best that it can be in his way. You know, that is what motivates him. Whereas Mauser just wants to sit on the top of the tree. He wants the power. So he's trying to sabotage the things that are going on around him. I think that is what makes him a better villain. But I do, when I think of Police Academy, I do think of Harris more than Mauser. But you're right, on this rewatch, he was a bit sleazier, you know, a bit more villainous in some of his actions.
Yeah, look,
I mean,
no, go on, Maff.
Mauser is more of a, he will step on anyone to get to the top. Whereas Harris, he wants to be recognised, he wants to, you know, to move up the ranks, but he also wants what's best for the police department. And I think that's where the difference is. You know, he does have a line of how far he will go, whereas if you feel that Mauser would basically, you know, sell his own mother to get where he wants to get to.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that, because I think because obviously Harris isn't in 3, and that's the one where it's actually the two competing against each other. The two academies are competing against each other, and I do get the feeling like if you had Harris in that film, he would have you'd have ended up redeeming him, because he would have had to have sided with Mahoney and that crew. And I think he would have done. I think he would have, like, you know. I don't know. It feels like he would have had pride in being part of Lasard's academy, at least in part. At least, so yeah, I agree. Like Mauser clearly feels like you say he would happily throw anybody under the bus in order to sort of to climb the tree and impress like the commissioner or whatever. So yeah, you know, he obviously doesn't come back because Harris then becomes Harris comes back in 4, and then he becomes like the ongoing sort of character. But like you say, it's one of the things I find interesting as well. It's clear that they have like favorites that keep coming back. Like they keep refining that crew, don't they? Like, you know, like, okay, this person's gonna like, because Callahan doesn't come back for 2, and I'd forgotten that. So Leslie Eastbrook does not come back for 2, which is a real shame, because like Callahan is one of those women that's sort of like scary, but yeah, she's scary, but like, you know, like clearly like really attractive. Like I'm down. We know when she's sort of beating people up and she pins them down, and everybody else is like, me next. I'm like, oh no, me. Like, yeah, I'm there as well. Like I've got hands up. It's quite clear they do 2, and then they refine that group again, don't they? They're like, okay, who are we going to bring back? And then in 4, like, who are we going to bring back? And it's sort of, they're refining that group.
It's good with her though, because although to a certain degree she's kind of used as a sex object, but also she's very powerful, and that so it kind of flips between them both. They obviously knew what they were doing there. You know, she's got a couple of good assets there that's going to kind of get people in, you know, interested in that. But she's that strong female. You know,
I think you're right. Go on.
Sorry, it's like we've got Hooks, and we all love Hooks because she's this timid little thing, and then she just finds her voice when she needs to, and that. But Callahan is that, you know, she's that strong person that I think, you know, it's what you need in the film to be able to kind of get away with some of the sexual, you know, scenes in it.
No, that's a really good point actually that you make, because in order to, I think sometimes with this, the reason, you know, less about the sort of the homophobia, because I think that's where it's sort of, you know, it really is problematic. But even like some of the sex politics or gender politics of this, like Callahan, although she is there to be ogled in, like she's treated almost as a sex object, but like you say, she's also incredibly sex positive. Like you can ogle her, but like she will kick your ass in doing so. And then she's the one that calls out George Martin in the first one. And like, you know, she's like, no, I'm going to have sex with this man because, you know, whatever. And it's sex positive. Like she's not called out as being, I mean, I'm sure there's some policy somewhere about an instructor sleeping with the cadets, but I don't care. Like she's actually very sex positive. And then when she comes back and she sleeps with is it in 3? There's Nagato,
Yeah.
the Japanese.
Yeah.
Because that I want the Japanese exchange student. I wanted to get to that because again, the racism there, like he's treated fairly when he gets to the academy because it's the academy. Like Lasanne's academy is the oddbods, isn't it? That's where the sort of the misfits go. But she ends up sleeping with him again because he knows martial arts and it's sort of that sort of thing. Like again, she's very sex positive actually. And like you say, she takes part in the action at the end. Like she's fighting alongside all the others, and there's at no point is there like, oh, Callahan, get down. Like she's just as part of the action. So yeah, it doesn't seem to be.
I think where the series falls down more than anything else is the homophobic side. I think everything else, and again, that's unfortunately the era that it was set in.
Mm-hmm.
I think they probably looked at it and thought, we're going to have these jokes in, but we need to have it's like the racist jokes, but then you have the looks of, what Hightower does in the first one when he tips the car. The fact that Hooks, she becomes, that kind of strong person as well, where she's arresting people. She's, she finds a voice and that. So they knew to tick them boxes, and they probably thought at that point, with the homophobic side, that can slide a bit. Whereas I think if you was to make these nowadays, that would be addressed a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, yeah, 100%. I think you're right. And this, we're going to I think we're getting close to the point of sort of the question I want to ask and that. But I think you're right. I think weirdly, like this, the homophobia of this is the real problem. I think it's just the 80s. I just think in the 80s, again, like, this is the AIDS era. This is sort of, because let's be clear, like as well, like the 80s wasn't hugely homophobic in other ways. Like, if you there was a masculinity to being flamboyant and stuff. Like, look at any glam rock band or like Boy George or like, or anything like it was there in your face sort of thing. Yet there was this sort of denial, this almost like going the other way, wasn't there, to sort of try and push back against it. So I don't know. It's an odd one. It's a real sort of oddity with like the homophobia in the whole films, but then also the racism, like as well, is like you say, it's sort of there's an acceptance. Like it shows that Lassard is almost accepting, because the way Mauser talks to Nagato and all the sort of like the Japanese jokes he makes, like you were saying about going too far. Like in that scene where he sort of calls him out and he starts making all these sort of like Japanese or Japanese centric sort of like racist jokes. I was a bit like, has this gone too far? Like, is Mauser now just like not even funny as a villain? Like, is he just an absolute prick? Like, and there's a few times where it's that, but that was the one scene where I was like, this really feels like they've taken this too far, with like racist humor. I don't know. Anyway, what are thoughts on that?
I think they tried to push that envelope, and maybe I think because Nagato, he doesn't come back with anything as such to Mauser. Whereas, like the Hightower one, Hightower responds, there's no comeback until further down, into the film, where he then kind of, there's is it in the third one when there's a fight on the boat?
Yes.
And there's Jones and they're both fighting together, and then they walk off all. So we obviously know he's a badass. We accept him. It's just, again, I think there's certain things back in the 80s that didn't know how to deal with them.
I don't think they cared, actually. That's the thing, because it's weird. It's weird because the thing is, like, the Sards Academy is accepting. That's the thing, though, isn't it? Like, because the moment Nagato turns up and the taxi driver's trying to rip him off, $700 for the taxi ride, instantly, like, Mahoney and Hightower sort of step in, and then they're just like, oh, sign up's this way. Like, there's no sort of like, it's just, oh yeah, you're in, you're here to sign up. We'll give you an opportunity. It's about, the film's weirdly about acceptance. But the villains always seem to be just that little bit too far. And obviously because of sort of the era, even the heroes sometimes feel a little bit, like, oh, we're accepting of everyone. Accept them.
But it's same as in 4 with citizens on patrol. Hightower and Mahoney is talking obviously, and this big black guy on a motorped pulls up and he's like, "Oh, it's little Tommy." Oh, I can't remember what he's called, but you know, I used to bounce me on your knee. He says, "Really?"
Yeah,
And then
house.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, and obviously he does that bit where he picks up the scooter and he walks off with it. But again, it's like sign up over there. Come on, you know, you're part of us. Anyone can do this, and that's why we kind of cheer them, because they are so accepting the fact that, you know, it doesn't matter who you. This is where it kind of gets with it, because it doesn't matter who you are. We will find a spot for you. We will work
Yeah.
alongside you.
And that seems to be the general sort of like theme of them, isn't it? Like that's supposed to be the positivity of these films. And I almost think this is why these films haven't been cancelled. I often think they've been forgotten for the most part as well, which is probably for the best for some people. But these haven't been, you know, where other things have sort of resurfaced. Like you'll get someone on TikTok or somewhere being like, "Hey, hang on, I've just watched this film from 1986. I've just watched Police Academy 3. Have you seen this? Oh my God, how is this available today?" Sort of like, you know, and someone will rail against it. I think, although there are things to rail against, I think because this film generally is about acceptance and the ragtag bunch of misfits like making good and actually proving that they are sort of like good for the cause, it's sort of like you say, it sort of treads that line very, very finely and sort of, unfortunately, sort of treads either side of it a little bit, you know, on either side. But yeah, I think that's why it's been able to survive, is because generally it's all in good. It's good. It's meant to be good natured, isn't it?
I think maybe the Zoomers just don't go back that far.
Yeah, yeah.
I honestly, I think that's what it is. So, like, I've seen multiple times now where the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, where he says something to the wrestler, it was Macho Man, wasn't it? And he says, "Oh, something about your boyfriend" or something like that, and it's like, "History will judge you, Spider-Man," or whatever it is, you know. But that's like 2002.
Yeah.
You know, that's like in their lifetime ish, you know. Whereas you go back into the 90s and definitely into the 80s, I just don't think they go that far.
No.
So
No.
I think someone on TikTok could pull out multiple scenes in this and say, "Oh my God, this is shocking. Our dads think this is funny."
Yeah. I did think that when you were saying about that, like they go back to, you know, when you said about them going back to Spider-Man, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, yeah, we have now got to we're now an age where I am like, you know, yeah, those silly kids." You are right. Actually, I think this is protected simply by being over 30 years old.
Yeah, I think you know, there are people just coming into the workforce now, aren't there, who were born in what, 2004?
Yeah.
It's like radio station. We had Radio 2 on at my mum's the other day, and like some 80s rock came on, and I thought, I'm that old that Radio 2 is now playing the stuff that I used to listen to.
Oh my God, like, yeah, that's it, gentlemen. We have reached the age where our childhoods have now become classic rock. That's
which is not a bad thing.
No, I'm quite happy with it, but yeah.
I think I know what question you're going to probably ask near the end of this. I'm trying to skirt around, but I do think that throughout the films we do have people of color, and we have people, you know, females that they kind of really push forward. And for all there is the racist and the sexist stuff, there's a positive side to it. I think the thing that they're lacking is there isn't a gay person in this.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when there are the homophobic jokes there, it's why nowadays they don't work.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to really, I mean, although the Blue Oyster Bar, you do see, it's so amusing, the fact that, you know, they get them and they're dancing around and that. So although it does defend itself that way, you don't have a character to kind of root for.
To counter for it, to counter those
Yeah.
sorts of things. That's a very good point. That's a really good point. What I would say is as well, if you did have a gay character in this, if you, and obviously in '84, if you've ever watched anything around, when you were saying that, in my head, I was thinking of like, if you've ever seen, is it Beverly Hills Cop 2? Has the guy.
It's not Franco, is it? It's
you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, he makes him the coffee, and he's like, "You're joking." He's like, I'm not joking.
Yeah.
It's sort of really elaborate. And then the other guy, and then I'm also thinking about the film Mannequin, which is also a Kim Cattrall film. And there's a gay character in that, and they're sort of like super flamboyant, aren't they? He's called Hollywood in Mannequin, and so you have that sort of like super flamboyant sort of like gay character. Like you know, that would have been they'd have gone. That's the rate it would have gone, and if anything, I think it would have made things worse. And so, yeah, I don't think you could get. I'm sort of glad they didn't have a gay character, because I think it would have been too far, and you'd have had sort of like the super sort of flamboyant
Too
gay
much
character.
on
Yeah, exactly. It would be too stereotyped, and in doing that, I think it would be like, okay, that's when this would have come up again. Like, that's where this film would have been hunted down and destroyed. It right.
would have been some sort of John Inman character, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And
I mean, back then, Freddie Mercury was so flamboyant, but he didn't care, and that he was quite happy. And I think also the fact that the rest of the band accepted him, and to a certain, he didn't care what other people thought. Well,
he didn't out himself until later in the '80s either, though, did he? Really?
No,
but you're right, and I think there's others, but like there were known gay people, but it was often, I'm trying to think of like even do you remember the Carry On films?
Yeah.
I forget the guy's name now, but like there was people in the show business that were openly gay, but it was almost
Kenneth
like
Williams.
Kenneth Williams. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. So you're right, but I just think because this is an American Hollywood film, I think they would have gone the full, too much, and that's so it's probably a good thing they didn't have that character, because I think it would have been too far.
It would probably end up being like in Con Air, when you have the Mexican who puts the dress on and then slaps him. And it's
yeah, exactly. But
that's
worse.
A bit where it goes a little bit too far.
Yeah, it would have. Yes, exactly. There'd have been the scene of like, let me make this uniform more comfortable or something, and there'd have been something like that. So, yeah, it wouldn't have been good. I mean, because you go through the films, as we said, we've gone through most of sort of like, as you said, the plots are irrelevant, and I think even the climaxes are mostly irrelevant. They sort of happen for a purpose. They're there to sort of redeem the characters, aren't they? To show they're good, and they do the good thing. Each of them does that, like, there's no need to go into detail, because I think we've sort of gone into the theme of these. But like you say, the characters themselves are the point. Like, I want to sort of quickly, before we do sort of touch on the question I am going to get to for the Mahoney years, is like you say, these characters stand out. Like we've talked about Guttenberg as Mahoney, there's Tackleberry, who is clearly like crazy. Like he is, like I don't know, but there's something wrong with Tackleberry. You get the Kirkland family who like to punch each other.
He's probably the closest to someone in the American police force.
No, clearly. Like, as I said, you couldn't have Tackleberry today. Like, Tackleberry would not work as a 21st century character. But you talked about Jones. Like, Jones clearly sort of like is one of my favorites. I like the fact that they expand the Jones character, because he just starts with doing that Motormouth Jones, like he makes all the noises and stuff. Like that was his stick, wasn't it? And then they make him like the kung fu one later on, because he does the martial arts stuff, because he does almost like the dubbed movie stuff, and I think that's great. But
so good. And again, like if you forget all of the things that are problematic, but if you showed kids now just that scene, it's just not funny, because you've not grown up with the dubbed kung fu movies. You have to have watched the dubbed kung fu movies to realize what the gag is.
The badly dubbed kung fu films on VHS.
Exactly. And so I love that. I again, in my head canon, it was all over the place, but I loved the fact that they just introduced that from nowhere into 2. but then that becomes part of the police academy canon, doesn't it? Because it reoccurs throughout. So, no, I did like that he's suddenly a martial arts master, essentially, and can take out anyone.
Yeah, they do, because I love the fact it becomes part of his character. Like you said, this is the thing with like these films have like a weird relationship with continuity. Like something that was clearly a bit of a gag for two becomes like a character defining thing for the rest of the series. So yeah, no, I think it works, and I think it works. You know, like the same with like the thing with Tackleberry. I wanted, because you say about him being the most thing. The thing with Tackleberry is like he's another one that's sort of like, you know, not douchebag, sorry, like a doofus that makes good. But him having that massive gun, you know, like when he has his sort of like huge sort of like the Magnum or whatever it is, and how he uses that. Like there's a scene in the start of 2 when some kid won't get out to go to school.
Oh yeah,
because the films also like have this weird thing of like, you know, they're funny because the first one's funny, but it's never clownish. It's never like ridiculous. Like apart from Fackler, it's never like hugely ridiculous. But in the second one, it literally opens with him and he pulls his gun out and he's got a little rocket on the end of it that's like a gas grenade. He launches
it's like Hawkeye, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Like he's got like a little gas grenade on the end of his gun and he fires it into the car. So it's a very weird, like tonally as well. But like you say, it's that then becomes a thing, doesn't it? Like, you know, you'll do that now, mister. Because then he becomes like every film is Tackleberry threatening someone with his massive gun for something that's not massive. Like it's a kid not wanting to go to school. It's a person not putting their cigar out and all that sort of stuff. So they have sort of like character gags that come up throughout. And so you're right, they define the characters. But I kind of like that. I do. I find the characters endearing, and so that's where the film sticks with me. I like seeing the characters.
Yeah.
That's where I think the films shine. Any final thoughts then before I sort of ask the final question for these films?
I found it quite interesting because, like, throughout the films, you kind of get two of the same characters in a way. It's like with Jones, you get I've forgotten his name now. We do some fighting with Naga.
Oh, Nagato.
Nagato, right. Hightower has
House.
Or you could even argue Sweet Chuck.
Yes. Because they seem to pair up, didn't they? The third one.
They pair up. I mean, they're singing karaoke together in the dance.
Yes, I kind of like that scene as well.
Sweet Chuck and Zed are kind of together, but then you've also got with Tackleberry. There's Mrs. I've lost her name now.
Mrs. Feldman, the old woman?
Yeah, is it Feldman?
In 4.
Yeah, Mrs. Feldman. She's kind of then the gun crazy.
Yeah.
You know, let me shoot that, and then he lets her shoot it, and she ends up
flying backwards. Yeah.
And so it's amusing that you have these characters, but then they do kind of pair them up with the same, and that, which, you know, I mean, Mahoney's a bit of a different one, but then even all the girls that he kind of goes for, they do kind of play him back a bit as well.
Yeah, they do. And this thing, they always tend to pair Mahoney with. I mean, he has Jones, like he's always with Jones for the most part, but Mahoney gets paired with the attractive woman for the most part, the Guttenberg girl, as I think I'm going to refer to her for this podcast. And I think that's the love interest, isn't it? That's the sort of thing. So, yeah, no, it's a good point though. They sort of pair them off, don't they? So they can have those similar jokes and you know, they can have the sort of the oddball or the opposites, like you say, Zed and Chuck, Sweet Chuck, or Hightower and Sweet Chuck, and all that sort of stuff. So, and a lot of it works. I think it works kind of well for the most part. But we are going to.
There was one other moment that I did like in 4 is the bit where Lucard's gone to England. He's sat on the table with everybody.
All the goldfish.
And they all get up.
Goldfish.
And it's
so
like,
dumb in it.
I've been teaching them.
Funny.
And it's just, again, it's that silly little things that are just, it is like a comedy sketch. We're just going to throw things together and it's going to get put in a film and it'll work.
Yeah, I actually want to call out George Gaines because he obviously, he's obviously his screen time is reduced as the film sort of go on because he's obviously getting older and older. But he's a joy. Like again, he's another one that sort of like it's clear that he's clearly like insane, but he's a joy to watch. And some of the things he does is brilliant. And like when he's is it in either 3 or 4? No, it's 4 when they're doing the Citizens on Patrol thing, and it's Zed who's prompting him to do it. So going to be, and he sort of says it's going to be 40 weeks. He's going to be 40 weeks, and he just sort of copies the Bobcat Goldthwait way of talking and stuff like
He's like Leslie Nielsen kind of.
Yes, he is.
Police Squad, isn't it? That's what they're kind of playing him as.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine Leslie Nielsen playing this character sort of thing. But yeah, no, you're right. I think there's that's what I'm saying. There's so many characters in this that sort of stand out, which is why I think you have that nostalgia for it. Because even if the comedy doesn't work, like sometimes the characters work. Again, like the bit where in 4 where Zed is going to the poetry group. He goes to the Women's Institute meeting and to start for the poetry reading. Like it's ridiculous. It's so stupid, but I still chuckle when I see it. I also just want to comment before we move on to the final question. Police Academy 4 is a film first appearance for 2 people of note. David Spade. It's his first Hollywood role, and Tony Hawk is one of the skateboarders at the start of the film.
I didn't spot him, but I did spot David Spade, and I was like, bloody hell.
Yeah.
It was a weird skateboarding David Spade. So yeah, that was a bit strange.
It's his first movie appearance.
You could see they obviously had a stuntman for
it was like BMX Bandits, wasn't it? Where he's got a slightly bigger body shape.
But the guy that is with the Arnie, is it? He does his own stunts from the looks of it. Unless they're really good with the camera work there, it definitely looks like him.
No, I think it is. I think you're right. But
but David Spade, it's just someone with a blondish hair and a pink shirt on.
Well, originally, this is the thing I learned from the facts, and I watched a couple of the behind the scenes things on the disc. So Tony Hawk was brought in to be the David Spade skateboarding double, but then when he turned up, he was a foot taller than David Spade, and they were like, "We can't use him, but we'll still use him because he's a great skateboarder." So he's in the scenes, but they had to get somebody else to do. To be the stunt double because he was just too tall, which is kind of funny. So but anyway, let's get to that final question because we're sort of coming around.
Can I just add a couple of really quick things? So, because I've watched a couple of other 80s things in this last week, and what I realised is the 80s hated punks. Like punks were really bad guys all the time. And I think Matthew spotted one that was a dead ringer for Chris Phelps.
Yes. Yes.
Because all these teenage punks were clearly about 30 odd. But no, it's just a weird theme. And I loved it when Mahoney, his way of getting in the gang was just to act like a complete maniac. He just went so over the top.
Yeah.
Jughead, yeah. I thought that was brilliantly over the top. But again, one of my favorite bits, and there are lots and lots of highlights out of all of this, but we've talked about Bobcat there, or Zed. And when he gets with Laura, they have that moment, and, she's absolutely stunning. And he's just given the facial expressions into the camera. I just think it's brilliant. And then he's dancing through the meadow. I just think it's fantastic. I was literally crying at that bit. I just thought
with that bit though, when he spins her and they spin around and they fall on the floor, and you think, "Oh, this is a bit where they're going to be. I'm going to be sick."
Yeah, I'm going to puke.
That's what I mean. Like they know the characters. I think, and I wonder how much is ad libbed. I mean, like you say, they've gone to like obviously Bobcat. They've said like, right, prance towards the camera, and he's done it all and stuff. And so, and he was obviously a stand up comedian, and he's gone on to be a director and stuff. So he gets it. But there's so many of them that just do that. And I think, like you say, I wonder how much of this was ad-libbed or sort of like little bits and pieces. especially later as other people come in. So no, that's a good point. Any other points you want to make before we sort of get to that final question?
No, that's it for me.
No,
Okay,
I
let's
think-
get to that final question because I want to talk. I do separate out 1 to 4 and then 5 to 7 as two different sort of like blocks, not just reads of retrospective, but they are definitely of a piece. Do you think then you could make Police Academy today, and not just remake, but could you do a Police Academy film today? And if so, how?
When I started watching them, no. Having talked about it, yes, I think you could, because I think they could address it. It's like, straight away I was thinking these are quite homophobic, these are quite sexist, they're quite racist. But with us talking about it, you realise that they do deal with some of them subjects. So if they were to do it these days, it would be slightly different, but they could address that, and they could probably put a decent spin on it. In a way, we've had films like that, with the American Pies and that, so it is possible. You would just have to get someone who knows how to write it the right way, and again, you'd have to have the right cast, to be able to pull it off. If everyone's on board with what the idea of the film's going to be, it could easily be done. I mean, we're getting up shit as it is anyway with some of the films that we're getting out there, but I do think, you get several comedians. I mean, you get Chris Rock, or
Chris Rock, we are so our age now. I don't think Chris Rock is down with the kids anymore. Chris Rock's in his 50s.
This up and coming edgy comedian, Richard Pryor.
Yeah, we'll help Richard Pryor. Not Chris. Kevin Hart. That's it. Sorry, I meant Kevin Hart. He would be ideal for something like this.
Yes.
Like I said, Ryan Reynolds, Chris Pratt. There are certain actors that I could see that you could probably have in this. For Lassard, I could quite just see. God, this is point my brain's completely blank. Him who plays Elf.
Will Ferrell. Yes,
Ferrell.
thank you. Will Ferrell
Ferrell
was in my head. Yes, Will Ferrell would be
Could do this.
perfect.
I'm sure if we could sit down and probably pick out certain characters that could do these kind of things. Tackleberry, you could have John Cena do that. He did a film called The Marine. He's a big guy.
He's not too far from Peacemaker, to be honest.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
They could easily do this and to be fair, if it was done right, I could see that, and it would be quite positive.
I think so. Yeah.
It's scary because I think I put in Discord when watching this saying these are not good, but when you start kind of stripping them down, you realise that actually there's a lot more to this than what you first give it credit.
Everyone always remembers that, like I say, instantly goes, I think, to sort of the negatives and the stuff that doesn't work. But really, I think there's a lot that does work. So I think you're right. I think, before I get into my sort of thing, I agree with everything you said. And Will Ferrell completely crossed my mind. That's exactly who I was thinking for sort of like a Lassard kind of character. Dave, what do you think?
Brilliant fan casting, by the way. I wouldn't have thought of any of those, but especially the Will Ferrell one. I think that's brilliant. So for me, we were a bit more naive in the 80s, not just because we were kids, but I think just generally as a society, as a culture. So, having this ragtag mob thrown together and sort of rubbing against the grain. So there's the establishment, and then you've got this group of misfits, and then they come good. That is the essence of that is a brilliant story, and I think you could redo it. I don't think anyone in Hollywood rightly would touch doing the police right now. I think it's the wrong kind of thing. But you could put a sci-fi spin on it. I don't want to copy the Orville, but you could make it so it's some kind of sci-fi futuristic police or something like that.
Let me stop you there, right, before you go to it, because I'm going to throw it. You say sci-fi. Guardians of the Galaxy is this.
True. Yeah, very true.
I think,
I was thinking more low budget. I was thinking more Red Dwarf budget than Guardians of the Galaxy budget. But yeah, I think that's the only way you could do it. But that's just with it being the police. I just don't think you could. It wouldn't land in the same way if you had all these different sketches and stuff. Because, like I say, the essence of it is just misfits coming together within an establishment that doesn't really want them there. So, that the essence of that, I think, is a good story.
No, I agree. Go on, Matt.
Do you think you could get away with it if they turned it and made it into like the army, and that if they kind of spun it that way, a bit like is it Hacksaw Ridge with Clint Eastwood?
Clint Eastwood, that's a great film as well.
He takes a bunch of misfits basically, which like Police Academy, and turns them into something which you don't we know what they're going to be, but film wise you don't expect them to be there. So yeah, being the police could be an issue, but maybe if they took it down a different route, like the army, the navy, which wherever they want to go that way.
You're right, because I think by the way, Hacksaw Ridge, great deep cut. I love that film, and it also sort of crossed my mind. I was thinking, that was a serious version of this film, which also has a sort of a finale that comes out of nowhere for no good reason. But because you're right, because they have done this another way. It's like there's a film called Down Periscope with that has got Kelsey Grammer, and they do it as a submarine crew, which is a similar thing. I'm trying to think. There are other ones like this, sort of Stripes, which obviously Bill Murray and Harold Ramis has done a similar thing, and that was with the army, but that was a bit more of the comedy. That was more like SNL style comedy. I think you're right. I think there's an acceptance way with this. What I would say is, he's saying, Dave, what you saying about you can't really do it now because the police and the position of the police in America at the moment. And I agree. I think it would be a brave person to take it on at the moment. And to Maff's point as well, like you need a very, almost like a really nuanced script to how to do this. However, I always think back to after 9/11, and this is a weird side point, but after 9/11, I read an article, and this was probably sort of early 2002 when this came out, that basically said action movies are done. There can be no more American action movies. Like, we can never do this again. We've had this massive tragedy. We've seen this thing. We are never going to have action movies again. And this article was all about this. I've still got it somewhere. I printed it off and I've kept it. It's this fascinating point of like, how can we show this on the bit? How can we have this as entertainment now that we've had this massive tragedy? And it's true. We sort of like, whilst that tragedy is still held and memorialized, like we moved on and we carried on doing action films. Like within 2 years, everyone was like back on the action train. And as you said, they get that slight bent. And it's the same with sort of like Vietnam, like, all of it, like after Vietnam, sort of like you have sort of the films that, not so much politicize it, but you have those sort of films that start to analyze it. Platoon.
Took a while though, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
It was sort of First Blood for me, that 82 that made America look at it a different way.
Yeah,
and then you got that kind of wave of Vietnam movies.
Just before that, you get like The Deer Hunter, and then you get you get True Blood. You get First Blood, and then True Blood. Yeah, you get First Blood, and then you obviously get, like you say, Platoon, and so on and so forth. But then you start to sort of, it can become satire and stuff. So I do think, given time, maybe we've said, like, obviously it was 2020 really when all the, with George Floyd and the notable police brutality. Coming into 2023, and you have a little bit of distance, maybe 2024 will probably be better with a little bit of distance. If you had that nuanced script that could do it as satire and do it as commentary, as well as being a comedy, like have those right characters. And I think you'd have to have, make it update those characters. You need the sort of the entry point character. I don't care what you say. You'd need a cool kid, kind of like the rogue that everyone sort of like can You need the Mahoney character, like, and I'm not saying I don't know who that could be, but like, you need that kind of character. But then the Misfits could be anything. You can have all kinds of things. Address trans rights, address sort of like LGBTQ kind of things, race rights, and all this other stuff like women's rights. Like, there's so much you could do with this, but you could do it funny, and it could be hilarious. I think it could do it really well, but you need to be. There's two things. It's where you'd have to be clever and you have to be really sort of brave. And I think you have to be quite confrontational with some of that humor. So I think it could be quite an interesting thing to do. And I think I'd like to see it come back. And with it, like obviously all these legacy sequels, like we've had like where they revisit the characters.
Cobra Kai,
exactly. Great example. Michael Winslow's back in show business. He took some time off, but he's back in show business. Steve Guttenberg's still out there. I think that there's quite a few that have actually passed on by now, actually. But like Bobcat Goldthwait's still out there. There's all kinds of cameos that could be done still, or bring them back as a sort of the handover character. I think it'd be quite interesting. Make Mahoney the chief of police. So that'd be amazing. Make him the commissioner. Like he actually
him Lassard. Yeah.
Yeah, make him Lassard or something. Like that'd be quite interesting. So I don't know. I think it could be done, but you're right. I think it had to be very sensitive, and I think you'd have to be no Blue Oyster or
you see, I think that they'd probably change Blue Oyster to RuPaul's Drag Race or something like that. Which again,
let's get to before you quit Drag Race. Let's get to Mission to Moscow before we talk about drag, because it does come up.
They did a series of Police Academy, didn't they? I remember seeing it. I didn't look too much into it because I thought, I don't know if I want to watch that as well. But there was a series, so I don't know whether any of the characters kind of went across into that or not.
I can tell you now. So they did a short-lived sitcom, which lasted, I think, like 8 episodes, and it's awful. Don't watch it. None of the characters go across. There are 2 cameos. One of them being Sweet Chuck, and one of them being Jones. Marvel Jones makes a cameo in the first episode. So and that was it. And then they also did the cartoon series, which only lasted 6 episodes, I think, and maybe a little bit longer. But that is also awful. But if you do, what I would say is, here's the weird thing about Police Academy, because it's after 4 that all this happened, because it becomes this thing. So you have a TV series, I think it was in the 90s. Then you get the comedy, this cartoon, which I think, Dave, I don't know which one of you noted that actually that led into Marvel did a short run of comics, which was based off the cartoon. Not only that, they did a full set of toys based on the cartoon characters. So they did, and a friend of mine's mum bought him the full set of Police Academy action figures based on the cartoon in the early 90s. And yeah, so
I got hold of a digital copy of that first Marvel comic. Just if you Google it, you'll eventually find it. Made it to the second page. I was like, this is terrible. It's the worst thing. You don't need to find that one.
No. The thing is, with this series, I think it's slightly, as it gets sillier, more as we get into the second block, which I sort of let's refer to them as the silly years. It needs almost that raunch factor every now and then, doesn't it, for it to work? Which again sort of falls away a little bit. But yeah, these are fundamentally, they're supposed to be a sex comedy. That was the idea. It falls into our thing, and that's why I think they sort of, as they get more child friendly, they become less funny in that sense.
Yeah, it's that comedy relief that it needs to be able to kind of move a scene on.
Yeah.
To branch onto something else. It's kind of, we're going to end a scene with Callahan's boobs in the water. That's obviously one of the things that I do remember from, before watching them, were, the bit where they all pile in and she's like, oh shit, and she's swimming away.
Clearly she knew that was going to happen. And by the way, that's a great name for a band, by the way. I want to see a band called Callahan's Boobs. That's...
But, I mean... going back, if things are done in the right way, they can be. You know, I mean,
Mm.
you mentioned 9/11 and end of action films. Now, a few years later, we get Man of Steel, which then leads on to Batman, Superman. They crash into buildings.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
buildings come down. And it's addressed and dealt with in the right way, so therefore it's accepted.
Mm.
If things are done just for the sake of it, then that's where it falls down. But if it's good writing and done in the respectful right way, even going back to the originals, the sexism and the racism, it's not good, but it is dealt with.
Yeah.
So you can accept it. But choice of words, it's not acceptable. You can understand where
It's
they're coming from.
I think it is remembered as being handled badly, but actually when you watch it, or when you really think about it, they tried to deal with it in an accepting and in strangely positive way. It's just clunky and very 80s. I think is the problem.
You remember it for the dear. He said
The old dear, I like that. Yeah,
he said the F word there, and you wouldn't be able to mention things like that nowadays. But again, there's a positive spin on it in the end of how they deal with it. It's not like it's said, it's used, and then that's it. It's just glossed over. There is a reaction.
Yeah.
And that now, whether you agree with the action or not, that's another debate. But there's a reaction and a consequence for them using that.
Yeah. No, it's very true. I think we'll end on that. So I think that's a really good point, actually. So we've gone through the first 4 films of the Police Academy series. We will be back for what we're going to refer to as the Silly Saga, 5, 6, and 7, which is a different tone entirely. But I want to, before we just wrap up, I want to say thank you very much, Dave. Thank you very much, Maff, for coming on to Talking Police Academy. It's been a lot of fun, actually. I don't think anybody has given Police Academy such a serious debate as we have done. If anything, I don't think Police Academy deserved such a serious debate, but I think it was good fun to have. So I'm glad we did it. But anyway, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of fun. But before we go, let's go through. Dave, where can people find you and where can people hear you?
So on Twitter, at the moment, at least, you can get me at Seattle Dojos. You can get me on various podcasts. You can get me on Comics Emotion. You can get me on VHS Strikes Back. You can get me on Chris and Dave's Reality Cast. And recently resurrected for the World Cup only, Chat Footy as well. And also appeared recently on Geek Girl Soup, where Chris and I covered it was actually a Japanese 2020 movie called Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes. Scott, I actually think you might like that as well. It's quite an interesting one.
I'll take note.
Really interesting premise. So this guy finds that looking through his monitor, he can see 2 minutes into the future. It starts with that simple premise. It's a completely indie movie as well.
Awesome.
Really cleverly written. Really super stuff. So
maybe one for
language movie.
Yeah. Maybe one for Stories Out of Time and Space. I was going to say one for stories. I think sounds good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So all of those places, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somewhere, but cheers for having us on. It's been a lot of fun.
No, thank you. And Maff, where can people find you?
I'm Maff78 on Twitter. Because of Dave, I have appeared on a couple of podcasts. We're doing one this Thursday, the final season episode of Andor. So I appear on there, and that if you really can put up with my dulcet tones. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Good. Well, you will be back for, let's say, the silly years. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. This has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this. And going through this film, the one thing I will say is my letterboxd has been absolutely sort of like, you get the sort of the actors that you've seen a lot this year, because obviously it gives you the stats. All of a sudden, there are certain actors just sort of, cropping up, and I feel I'm going to end this year with someone like George Gaines as my top most watched actor for some reason. But anyway, yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening and enjoying this. If you want to know more, or you actually enjoy what we're doing, please leave a review. Go onto your platform, podcast catcher, and leave a review and let us know what you think. But more than that, go check out our Patreon, www.patreon.com/20cg media. There's all kinds of things on there. I talk with Julian Darius about the Twilight Zone episode by episode. I do my 30-minute thoughts every month, and we have creators on every quarter to talk about different bits and pieces. So go check that out. But for now, thank you very much. We will be back in the Police Academy in the next episode. But for now, thank you very much, and we'll talk again soon.